Lily Thompson sat on the porch of her aunt's house, the warm sun shining down, but her heart felt as cold as the grave. At just 7 years old, she had already faced the greatest loss a child could endure. Both her parents had died in a car accident, leaving her in the care of her aunt, who was kind but often distracted by her own life. The world felt empty without them. Every day, Lily would walk through the nearby woods, her only comfort the sound of rustling leaves and birds chirping. Her parents used to bring her here on weekends, where they would hike, play, and care for the stray dogs they found. The animals had always been a part of her life, a part that she cherished deeply. Now, without them, the woods felt eerily quiet, like something was missing. But one particular afternoon, as Lily wandered further into the woods than usual, she heard something. It was faint at first, like a soft whimpering, but it grew louder as she crept closer. Her heart skipped a beat. She knew there was something, someone, out there. She pushed through the dense underbrush, her curiosity getting the better of her. And then, she saw it. Behind a rusted chain-link fence stood a small, haggard German shepherd. It was chained to a post, its ribs showing through its fur, and its eyes were filled with a mix of pain and fear. The dog's fur was matted and covered in dirt, and it barely lifted its head when Lily approached. She gasped. "Oh, my God," she whispered, her heart breaking for the poor creature. "What happened to you?" The dog didn't respond, only stared at her with haunting eyes. It looked so weak, so helpless. Lily felt an overwhelming urge to help, but she knew she couldn't do it alone. The building around her was old and abandoned, clearly not a place for children. But Lily couldn't just walk away. For a moment, she stood there, watching the dog, her mind racing. She remembered the stories her parents had told her about rescuing animals, how they would never leave an animal behind in need. They would never leave a dog behind, she thought, remembering her father's voice. "No," she said quietly to herself. "I can't leave you here. I won't." Lily knelt down and reached her hand through the gaps in the fence, cautiously extending it toward the dog. She wasn't sure if it would trust her, but she had to try. Slowly, the dog shifted its weight, dragging itself toward her, its eyes fixed on her hand. She swallowed hard, her voice trembling as she spoke to it. "It's okay. I won't hurt you." The dog let out a faint growl, but Lily wasn't scared. She could tell that it was more afraid than aggressive. She didn't know how, but she felt a connection to the animal, a deep pull that she couldn't explain. She pulled her hand back for a moment, glancing around. The last thing she wanted was to get caught here. But who could she tell? She didn't want anyone to know about this place, not if it meant the dog would end up back in the hands of whoever was responsible. The more she looked at the dog, the more determined she became. There had to be a way to get it out. She wasn't going to leave it here. That night, after dinner, Lily went to her room and locked the door. She sat on her bed, her legs tucked under her, her heart racing with excitement and fear. She knew what she had to do, but it wasn't going to be easy. She glanced over at the window where the moonlight filtered through, casting a silver glow on everything it touched. The world outside seemed so quiet, so still. But it wasn't still. It was calling her. The dog was calling her. Lily's aunt had already gone to bed, leaving her alone in the house. She wasn't sure how late it was, but it was dark enough for her to slip out unnoticed. Her aunt wouldn't even know she was gone until morning. Lily quickly grabbed her old backpack from the closet. She packed a flashlight, a bottle of water, and a few granola bars. She wasn't sure what she would need, but she wasn't about to leave anything to chance. She then grabbed a length of rope from under her bed. It had been her father's, used for their hiking trips, and she knew it might come in handy. After double-checking the door to make sure it was locked, she quietly crept down the stairs, feeling like a shadow in the night. The house was quiet, the only sounds were the creaking of the wooden floor beneath her feet. Lily's heart raced, her breathing shallow as she made her way to the back door. It felt like she was in a dream. Everything around her was dark and quiet, except for the pounding of her heart. She opened the back door as quietly as possible and slipped outside, the cold air brushing against her skin. The woods were waiting for her, just beyond the garden. The walk to the abandoned building felt longer than usual. Lily's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, but she tried to push them aside. She knew she couldn't hesitate now. The dog needed her. When she arrived at the site, she took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the surroundings. The building loomed in front of her, dark and silent, like a sentinel guarding a terrible secret. She knew the dog was inside, waiting. She had to be quick. Lily moved toward the fence, her footsteps light and careful. She reached into her backpack and pulled out the flashlight, flicking it on. The beam illuminated the area in front of her, and she immediately saw the dog lying motionless in the corner of the pen. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. There was a sickening, metallic smell in the air, blood, sweat, and fear. She knew the dog wasn't the only one suffering here. There were others, she was certain of it. But tonight, she was going to save at least one. She gently crawled under the fence, squeezing through the gap. Her heart pounded in her chest as she approached the dog, who was still lying there, too weak to move. She kneeled beside it and whispered softly, "It's okay. I'm here now." She unwrapped the rope and started untying the chain around the dog's neck. The dog didn't resist, but Lily could feel its fear. She was careful, trying not to make too much noise. The chain came loose, and the dog didn't move at first. But then, slowly, it stood up, its legs wobbling beneath it. Lily's breath caught in her throat. She had done it. She had freed the dog. She smiled at the dog, whispering, "Come on, let's go. You're safe now." As Lily began leading the dog out of the pen, a loud crash echoed from behind her. Her heart skipped a beat. She froze, realizing too late that someone had heard her. A man's voice shouted from the distance, "Hey! Who's there?" Lily's blood ran cold. She glanced back at the dog, who was now standing with her, staring at her with eyes full of gratitude. They had no time to waste. Without another word, Lily grabbed the dog's leash and ran into the woods, her feet pounding against the earth as she fought to escape the men who were now chasing her. The adventure had just begun. Lily's legs burned as she sprinted through the dark forest, the dog, now named Shadow, running alongside her. The branches scraped her skin, the cold night air cutting through her thin jacket, but she barely noticed. Every step, every breath, was driven by one thing: escape. Behind her, she could hear the angry voices of the men growing louder. They were closing in fast. Lily's heart hammered in her chest. She didn't dare look back, she couldn't risk losing time. Shadow's paws thudded heavily against the forest floor, his breathing labored but steady, as if he, too, understood the urgency. "We have to get away," Lily whispered through clenched teeth, her voice barely audible over the pounding of her heart. The dog's ears twitched, his eyes fixed ahead, as if sensing the danger closing in. There was something in the way Shadow moved now, faster, more purposeful. Lily could feel his strength returning. The days of tending to his wounds, cleaning his fur, feeding him, had given him the energy he needed to move, to survive. But it wasn't just his body that was healing, it was his spirit, too. Shadow wasn't just any dog, he was no longer the broken, fearful creature she had found that afternoon. He was something more. "I'm so sorry you've been through this," Lily muttered, guilt tightening in her chest. She wished she could have done more for him sooner, but it was too late for regrets. The men who had abused him were still out there, hunting for them. Suddenly, a low growl rumbled from Shadow, pulling her from her thoughts. She glanced down at him, and he locked eyes with her. His posture had shifted. He was alert, ready. A loud crash from behind snapped Lily back to the present. The men had broken through the underbrush. They were close. Too close. Lily's breath hitched as she pushed forward, desperate to outrun them. She had to think, there must be a way to get to safety. As they ran deeper into the forest, Lily spotted an old, half-destroyed cabin ahead. It was small and unremarkable, but it could be their only chance to hide. "Come on, Shadow, we can make it," she urged, her voice cracking with fear. She gritted her teeth, determined not to let them catch her. The cabin seemed like a sanctuary, a temporary haven. They had to reach it, no matter what. But then, a shout from behind froze her in her tracks. "Get back here, you little thief," one of the men yelled, his voice slurring with anger. "You can't escape with our dog." Lily's heart skipped a beat. They knew who she was now. They knew she had taken the dog. Panic surged through her chest, but before she could react, Shadow darted forward, pulling ahead with surprising speed. "Shadow, wait!" Lily cried, but it was too late. He had already reached the cabin's porch, standing tall and alert, facing the direction of the approaching men. Lily was forced to stop. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she watched the dog. His stance was firm, his body rigid with readiness. There was something fierce about him now, something primal. As the men burst into the clearing, they froze, seeing the dog standing in front of the cabin. They hadn't expected this. The leader of the group, a man with a scar running down his face, took a step forward, brandishing a large stick. "Get out of the way, mutt," he sneered. "This dog belongs to us." Shadow growled low in his throat, his eyes narrowing as he bared his teeth. The sound was deep and unsettling. It sent a chill down Lily's spine. "Shadow," Lily whispered, her voice barely audible. The dog's response was immediate. With a swift movement, he leaped forward, his body coiling with energy, and he lunged at the man. The man barely had time to react before Shadow's teeth snapped dangerously close to his face. The man stumbled backward, his eyes wide with shock. What the hell," the man stammered, his hand trembling as he wiped sweat from his brow. Lily stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never seen Shadow like this, never imagined he could be so strong, so protective. But as she watched the scene unfold, she realized that he was fighting not just for survival, but for her, for both of them. The man cursed, raising the stick higher. "You filthy animal!" But before the man could strike, Shadow charged again, faster this time, knocking the stick out of his hands. The other men hesitated, fear creeping into their eyes as they watched the German shepherd stand firm, growling as if daring them to approach. "Run, Lily! Go!" Shadow seemed to say with his eyes. And for the first time since they had started running, Lily didn't hesitate. She turned and bolted for the cabin, her heart racing as she reached the porch and ducked inside. Shadow followed closely behind, his head held high, still growling at the men, ensuring they couldn't follow. The door creaked shut just in time, and Lily pressed her back against it, breathless, her hands trembling. Inside, the cabin was dark and cold. Dust hung in the air, and the smell of mildew lingered. But for now, it was enough. Lily slid down the door, her legs giving way as she sat on the creaky floor. Shadow trotted over to her, his movement steady and calm, his eyes still watchful. He sat beside her, nudging her gently with his nose. She looked up at him, her breath still coming in short gasps. "Thank you," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Shadow leaned into her, offering her comfort, his warm body providing a sense of security that she hadn't felt in days. Lily closed her eyes for a moment, letting the silence of the cabin fill her ears. Outside, she could hear the men shouting, trying to figure out how to get in. But for now, they were safe. But this was only the beginning. They couldn't stay here forever. The men would find them eventually. Lily took a deep breath, the weight of the situation settling in. "We need to get out of here, Shadow," she murmured. "But we can't do it alone. The cabin creaked and groaned as the wind picked up outside, but within its walls, Lily and Shadow were momentarily safe. Lily sat on the dusty floor, her back pressed against the wooden door, her legs folded tightly beneath her. The faint sound of the men's voices drifted in through the cracks, but they hadn't yet figured out how to break into the cabin. For now, the danger had passed, but Lily knew it wouldn't last long. She had to think, she had to figure out what to do next. Shadow lay quietly beside her, his head resting on his paws, eyes scanning the room with a quiet vigilance. Despite the earlier confrontation, he wasn't panting, wasn't visibly exhausted. Instead, there was a calm in his movements, an almost deliberate grace. Lily watched him, still unable to fully comprehend the shift in the dog since they had escaped the fighting ring. Before she could dwell too much on her thoughts, a soft whine escaped from Shadow. Lily blinked in surprise as the dog's eyes locked with hers. She could see something different in them now, something far more intelligent and aware than the fearful creature she had first encountered. "Are you okay?" she whispered, gently running her fingers over his fur. Shadow tilted his head slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. For a moment, they sat in a comfortable silence, the bond between them deepening. Lily had never known the comfort of having someone beside her who truly understood her feelings, her struggles. But now, Shadow had become her anchor. Despite the fear and confusion swirling in her mind, she felt a sense of peace in his presence. "I'm scared," Lily admitted softly, almost to herself. She hadn't said it aloud yet, but the words came rushing out now, the weight of her fear finally surfacing. "What if we can't make it? What if we can't escape them forever?" Shadow lifted his head, his ears pricking at the sound of her voice. Then, to Lily's astonishment, he nudged her gently with his nose. It was subtle, just a soft nudge, but it was enough to make her stop and look into his eyes. They seemed to radiate something different. Understanding. Strength. Without fully realizing it, Lily found herself smiling, her lips trembling as she returned the gentle gesture, brushing his fur back from his face. "You're right," she said softly, her voice full of determination. "We'll be okay." And it was in that moment, as she looked into Shadow's eyes, that something strange happened. A warmth, almost electric, began to spread from her hand, the one she had placed on Shadow's fur. She pulled her hand away in surprise, but Shadow's eyes didn't move, and neither did the warmth. It was as though their connection had sparked something inside both of them. Something unspoken but powerful. Lily shook her head in disbelief. "What was that?" she whispered to herself, but Shadow simply laid his head back down on his paws, his eyes still unwavering. The feeling lingered for a moment, then faded, leaving her with a sense of peace, but also a strange sense of wonder. The next morning, after a restless night spent listening to the wind howl through the cracks of the cabin, Lily and Shadow ventured out. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting pale light through the trees. Lily's stomach growled with hunger, and she realized they needed food. She had packed a few granola bars, but it wasn't enough to sustain them for long. They couldn't stay here forever. As they moved cautiously through the woods, Lily found herself constantly glancing over her shoulder, still paranoid that the men would track them down. The cabin was only a temporary refuge, and she knew it wouldn't be long before the men realized they were no longer in it. But for now, the morning felt like a fresh start, a momentary pause from the chaos. Shadow was walking beside her, his movements more fluid than they had been before. He was still thin, though no longer in the same pitiful condition he had been in when she first found him. His fur was slowly becoming shinier, healthier. He moved with a certain grace that she hadn't noticed before, his body more agile and strong. It wasn't just his physical appearance that had changed, though. There was something about him now that felt different. More alive. As if a part of him had been awakened. A part that was more than just a dog, more than just an animal trying to survive. "Where do we go next, huh?" Lily asked aloud, as if expecting the dog to respond. Shadow glanced up at her as if he understood her question. His eyes were full of silent wisdom, and for a moment, Lily thought she saw a flicker of recognition in his gaze, as though the dog was thinking, "We will be okay." The thought made Lily shiver slightly. She pressed on, her steps more purposeful now, trusting Shadow's instinct to lead them. As they walked through the woods, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that something extraordinary was happening. The closer they got to the clearing, the stronger the feeling became. The moment they entered the open space, Shadow suddenly stopped, his body stiffening. His head jerked to the right, ears perked. Lily immediately felt a chill run through her. She didn't know what was happening, but she could tell something was off. Shadow's behavior was unlike anything she had seen before. "Shadow," she called softly, her voice trembling. The dog didn't move, his eyes scanning the surroundings with intensity. Then, in one fluid motion, he turned and trotted toward the trees. Lily quickly followed, her heart racing, but she had no idea what was happening. As they neared a thick patch of bushes, Shadow's movements slowed. He stopped just short of the brush, sniffing the air deeply, then suddenly began to dig at the ground with his paws. Lily's eyes widened in surprise. What was he doing? The ground beneath his paws shifted, and a faint sound of scraping echoed through the woods. Shadow had uncovered something. Lily knelt down beside him, her curiosity piqued. She pulled back a large stone that had been buried beneath the dirt. And there, underneath, was an old metal box, rusted, but still intact. Her heart skipped a beat. It was almost as if Shadow had known where it was all along. She carefully lifted the box out of the hole and wiped the dirt off it. It was heavier than she had expected. Her fingers trembled as she opened the rusty latch and slowly lifted the lid. Inside, she found several old, weathered papers. As she unfolded one of them, she gasped. It was a map. A map of the very forest they were in, with several marked locations, each one circled in red. And as her eyes scanned the map, she realized that they were far from alone. There was a network of hidden safe houses, places where people who had fought against the dog-fighting rings had hidden their dogs, their secrets. Lily's breath caught in her throat. Could this be the answer? Could there be a way out for both of them? Before she could examine the map further, a loud rustle from the trees interrupted her thoughts. Lily's heart dropped. The men. Lily's heart skipped a beat as the sound of rustling leaves grew louder. Her eyes widened in panic, and she immediately grabbed the map, shoving it into her backpack as she glanced around. Shadow's posture was tense, his muscles were coiled like a spring ready to explode into action. He growled low in his throat, a sound that sent a chill down Lily's spine. She knew the men were close. Too close. "We have to move, now," Lily whispered urgently, trying to stay calm. She knew the forest well enough to navigate through it, but now, every rustling sound felt amplified, every shadow seemed threatening. They couldn't risk getting caught again. Shadow's eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, there was an unspoken understanding between them. "We need to get out of here." Without a word, Shadow turned and bolted into the forest, his body slicing through the underbrush with ease. Lily hesitated only a moment before following suit, her legs pumping as she ran after him. The air was thick with tension. Behind them, the rustling grew louder, and Lily could hear the men shouting, their voices harsh and desperate. "Get back here," one of them yelled. "You can't escape." Lily's breath was ragged as she pushed through the thick woods. The branches scratched at her face and arms, but she didn't care. All that mattered was getting away. Shadow was leading her, his body moving like a shadow itself, swift and silent. Lily had no idea how far they had run, but the men were still gaining. She could hear their footsteps crashing behind them now, the sound of pursuit unmistakable. Her heart raced, her lungs burned, but she couldn't slow down. "Shadow, we need to find somewhere safe," Lily gasped, almost pleading. She had no idea where they were headed, but Shadow didn't hesitate. His body continued to move with purpose, weaving between trees and over fallen logs as if he knew exactly where they were going. And then, as if by instinct, Shadow took a sharp turn toward a narrow, overgrown path leading deeper into the forest. Lily followed, not questioning him, but trusting him with her life. Minutes later, they found themselves standing in a small, secluded clearing surrounded by thick trees. The forest here was dense, the underbrush almost impenetrable. It felt like a natural barrier, a hidden spot that could shield them from view. For the first time since they had started running, Lily allowed herself to slow down. She pressed her hands on her knees, trying to catch her breath. Shadow, however, remained alert, his head swiveling in every direction. His body was tense, every muscle ready for action. He wasn't convinced they were safe yet. Lily bent down beside him, trying to steady her racing heart. "We can't keep running like this," she murmured. "We need help. But I don't know who to trust." Shadow turned his head toward her, his eyes softening slightly. It was as if he understood her uncertainty. The bond they shared was undeniable. As Lily sat there, trying to calm her mind, she remembered the map, the one Shadow had uncovered. Could it really lead them to safety? She knew the next step was to find one of the marked locations, but they had no idea how far away it was or how to navigate through the forest with the men still after them. She looked up, her eyes searching the woods around them. But just as she was about to speak, a crack of a twig underfoot sent her heart into overdrive. Shadow's growl was immediate, a deep, menacing sound that echoed through the clearing. Lily froze, her blood running cold. The men were here. Somehow, they had tracked them down. Without thinking, Lily grabbed Shadow's leash and yanked him closer to her, urging him to stay quiet. She held her breath, her body pressed against the thick trunk of a tree, hoping to remain hidden. The men's voices grew louder, and Lily's heart beat faster. She could hear them laughing, taunting, as they moved closer to the clearing. "We're almost there," one of the men said, his voice filled with malicious glee. "We'll find that damn dog, and we'll make her pay for taking him." Lily's stomach twisted in fear. She couldn't let them find her. Not after everything they'd been through. They had to escape. She risked a glance at Shadow, who was standing still beside her, his body tense but poised. His eyes flickered toward her, as if silently asking, "Are you ready?" Lily nodded, determination flooding her veins. "We have no choice." She stood up slowly, pulling Shadow along with her, and began to creep through the underbrush toward the other side of the clearing. Every step felt like an eternity, each rustle of leaves a threat. Her heart raced, her mind spinning with options, none of them good. She couldn't outrun the men forever. But just as Lily was about to turn and make a break for it, Shadow suddenly stepped in front of her, his body stiff with alertness. He growled low, and Lily froze, not daring to move. Something was wrong. Before she could figure out what had happened, a figure stepped into the clearing, one of the men, his gun raised, his eyes scanning the area. Lily's breath caught in her throat. The man's eyes narrowed as he spotted them. "There you are," he sneered. "You thought you could escape?" Lily's heart stopped. The man was too close. She couldn't run. There was nowhere to hide. But then, in a flash of movement, Shadow lunged forward, his body a blur of fur and muscle. The man barely had time to react before Shadow's teeth sank into his arm, causing him to scream in pain. The gun fell from his grip, clattering to the ground. Lily's mind raced as she watched the scene unfold. This was their chance. "Run!" Lily shouted, her voice breaking through the shock of the moment. "Now!" Without hesitating, she turned and sprinted away, her legs carrying her through the dense forest. She didn't dare look back. The sound of the man's panicked shouts echoed in her ears, but she kept running, pushing herself faster. Behind her, she heard the sound of footsteps, Shadow's heavy panting as he followed close behind. Lily's breath was ragged, her body screaming for a break, but she didn't stop. They had to keep moving. After what felt like an eternity, Lily finally slowed her pace, glancing over her shoulder to see if they were being followed. The woods were eerily quiet now, the sounds of the men's pursuit fading into the distance. She couldn't believe it, they had escaped. For now. She stopped, panting heavily, and looked down at Shadow, who was sitting beside her, his eyes calm but alert. Lily wiped the sweat from her brow, her chest rising and falling rapidly as she caught her breath. "I don't know how much longer we can keep running like this, Shadow," she said quietly, her voice filled with exhaustion and worry. "But we've come this far. We can't stop now." Shadow's tail swished lightly, and he nudged her gently with his nose, as if reassuring her. "We will keep going. Together." Lily smiled, though it was weak. She wasn't alone anymore. With Shadow by her side, she knew they would fight through whatever came next. But they couldn't rest for long. The danger was far from over. They had a new goal now, finding the safe house on the map, and finding a way to end the nightmare once and for all. The forest was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant calls of birds. Lily, her legs aching from running, slowed to a walk as she carefully navigated the underbrush. Shadow was beside her, his pace steady, his movements fluid and sure. Despite the dangers they had faced, the connection between them had only grown stronger, and together, they had survived. But now, Lily faced a daunting question: how much longer could they keep running? The map she had found in the metal box was their only hope. The marked locations on the map promised safe houses, places where others had hidden dogs like Shadow. Places where they could finally escape the men who had abused and exploited animals. But the map was cryptic, and Lily had no way of knowing how far these safe houses were, or even if they were still in operation. "Shadow, what do we do now?" Lily whispered to the dog, her voice trembling with exhaustion. "Where do we go?" Shadow turned to look at her, his eyes deep and knowing. He nudged her hand gently with his snout, a reassuring gesture. Lily smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. She had no answers, and the uncertainty weighed heavily on her heart. The moment of peace didn't last long. Suddenly, a voice rang out from the trees, low and commanding. "Lily," the voice called, a mixture of relief and urgency. "Over here." Lily froze, her blood running cold. It was a voice she didn't recognize, but it sounded familiar, as if it belonged to someone who knew her. Before she could react, the figure stepped into view, emerging from the shadows of the trees. The person was a woman, dressed in dark clothing, her face partially obscured by a hood. But there was something about her, something that felt different. "Who are you?" Lily asked, her voice filled with wariness. She instinctively stepped closer to Shadow, her protector. The woman held her hands up in a peaceful gesture. "I'm not here to hurt you," she said calmly. "My name is Sarah Lee. I've been looking for you." Lily's heart pounded in her chest. "How does she know me?" "I know who you are," Sarah continued, her voice gentle but firm. "And I know about the men who've been hunting you and Shadow." Lily's mind spun. How could this woman possibly know about her and the dangerous men who had been after them? Had she been watching them all along? But there was something in Sarah's voice that suggested she wasn't an enemy. There was an earnestness there, a sense of urgency. "How do you know all of this?" Lily asked, her voice still shaky. Sarah stepped forward, her eyes scanning the forest nervously. "I'm part of a network," she said quickly. "We've been working for years to track down these dog-fighting rings, and to rescue the animals they've been abusing. I've been tracking your location ever since you helped Shadow escape." Lily's breath caught in her throat. You know about Shadow?" She couldn't believe it. She'd been so careful to keep their whereabouts hidden, so why would this stranger know? "Yes," Sarah said, nodding. I know about Shadow, and I know what he's capable of. I also know what they did to him. She paused, her eyes locking with Lily's. They've been hunting him for a long time. Lily felt her chest tighten with emotion. The men, they had been hunting him. All this time. Why would you help us? Lily asked, still trying to process everything. Sarah's face softened. Because you're not alone. There are more people who care about these animals. And we've been trying to stop these fighting rings for years. You're not the only one who's been trying to escape them. Lily's eyes widened in realization. There are others. Others like Shadow. The thought made her heart swell with hope, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Sarah pulled out a small piece of paper from her pocket and handed it to Lily. It was a map, much like the one she had found, but this one had more markings. These are the locations of safe houses, places where people like you and Shadow can be protected. But the fight isn't over. They'll keep coming after you. Lily took the map, her hands trembling. I don't know if I can keep running, she said softly, more to herself than to Sarah. I don't know if I'm strong enough. Sarah placed a hand on her shoulder, her touch firm and reassuring. You don't have to do this alone. That's why we're here, to help. Lily looked up at Sarah, uncertainty in her eyes. How do I know I can trust you? For the first time since she'd met Sarah, the woman smiled. It was a small, knowing smile. Because I'm just like you, she said quietly. I'm fighting for the same cause. And I won't let you go through this alone. Lily studied Sarah's face, searching for any hint of dishonesty. But all she saw was sincerity. There was a quiet strength in Sarah's eyes, an understanding that mirrored her own. She had no choice but to trust her. Okay, Lily said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll trust you. Shadow, as if understanding the gravity of the situation, let out a soft whine and nuzzled Lily's side. She looked down at him, her heart swelling with love and gratitude. He had been her protector, her companion through every trial. And now, with Sarah's help, they could finally fight back. Sarah nodded. We'll get you and Shadow to safety. But first, we need to make sure you're hidden from them. They've been hunting you for too long, and we need to make sure you stay one step ahead. The next few hours were a blur. Sarah led Lily and Shadow deeper into the forest, through a series of hidden paths and tunnels that Lily never could have found on her own. Sarah moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had been here before, someone who had faced danger and survived. Finally, they reached a small, hidden cabin in the woods. It was secluded and well protected, tucked away from the prying eyes of the world. Inside, it was cozy, with a fireplace crackling and soft blankets piled high. Lily sank into a chair by the fire, feeling the weight of the last few days crash down on her. She had never been this tired, this worn out. But for the first time in what felt like forever, she also felt something else, hope. You're safe here, Sarah said, her voice soft. For now. Lily nodded, but the uncertainty remained. She had found a temporary refuge, yes. But the men who had been hunting Shadow were still out there. The fight was far from over. But Lily wasn't alone anymore. She had Shadow, and now she had Sarah, and the people she had found who were working to stop the cruelty of the dog-fighting rings. We're going to end this, Lily said softly, more to herself than anyone else. We're going to stop them. And for the first time, she believed it. The story comes to a close with a sense of resolution, though the battle is not yet over. Lily has found a new family, a new purpose, and with Shadow by her side, they are ready to face whatever comes next. The final twist is that Lily, once an isolated, broken child, has now become part of a larger movement, one that will change the lives of countless animals, and one that will give her the strength to stand up for what's right. This story is an inspiring journey about friendship, courage, and loyalty. Lily, an orphaned girl, rescues Shadow, an abused German shepherd, not just out of love, but from the deep desire to protect helpless creatures in need. We learn that, even when faced with danger, kindness and determination can change the fate of others. The story delivers a powerful message about loyalty and the strength of the bond between humans and animals. It emphasizes that offering help, love, and protection to vulnerable beings is crucial, and no matter how hard the journey gets, with determination and mutual trust, we can overcome any obstacle. If you loved this heartwarming story and were moved by the deep bond between Lily and Shadow, don't forget to like the video, comment and share your thoughts, and share this amazing story with your friends and family. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on more meaningful stories coming your way. Every interaction from you is a huge motivation for us to keep producing even more great content. Once again, we sincerely thank you for your support and for watching this video. We appreciate you taking the time to enjoy this story and share it with others. Stay tuned for more touching and meaningful stories. Wishing you a wonderful day, and don't forget to come back for more amazing tales.